Not loud enough. Come on. Are we ready? Okay, that's better. That's better. Now, just like in the airplane, this plane is going to Miami. No. No, this is all about where do we go from here, healing the culture divide. And if that was not the session you wanted to attend, you're more than welcome to leave right now. But I do promise you're going to regret that if you leave. There is a fantastic panel sitting here to talk to you. And we will have the very basic format of the discussion today. First 30 minutes panel discussion, followed by 20 minutes of a group discussion. And that's as simple as that. And in between, anybody want to dance and jump and sing, feel free, please, to do that. Okay? With that, so nice. Let me introduce our organizer here today, Sulaima Gurani.
Yeah. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for coming. Today, I have with me 3 experts who are representing between 17 and 30 years of experience of servicing communities, private and public companies, and we even have experts in this room on this topic. This is not entertainment. I have to make you pay attention to the fact that you today will be the working crowd. We will need your solutions to one of the most problematic situations we've had for many, many years. What is going on and how do we take it from here? How many of you are living in a so-called city? Who will consider themselves as, people living in a city? Who are living in a city? Raise your hands. And who lives outside the cities? Rest of you guys. Good. No one on the moon yet. Okay, good. How many of you are working in a private company? How many is working in a public, not political, but public office, public position? Not so many. Who runs for office or is in a political position? Few of you, good. And students? The next generation? Yeah, we're talking about your future, so stay tuned. So I grew up in the smallest towns and cities, the smallest areas that you can imagine in a very small country called Denmark. I'm half Moroccan, Danish, and Jewish. I don't think there's anyone with that combination. So I understand pretty much every religion and the things that are going on. I moved to US 2 years ago, and I moved to Texas just before Trump was elected. Perfect timing. I got to understand how US maybe think or maybe not think, I don't know. And for 7 weeks ago, I moved to Silicon Valley, so now I'm living in a different bubble. So I'm experiencing US as we speak. Today we have, today we have to think about what we will do with trying to make cultures more aligned. And with me, I have, let me see if I can find the pictures. Yes. So first of all, George, you being here in the panel is a great honor because you have a strategy for life called the faith-based strategist. What do you mean by faith-based strategist? I've never heard that before. Can you give a few sentences on what that is?
Trusting God.
Trusting God.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Is the trusting God a solution?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes?
Putting God first.
We have many religions in this amazing country. Can we coexist?
God says we can.
Yeah, okay, I like that. It's going to be good. George, you chose a picture. You cannot see it yourself, but we have a picture of you giving a talk here. Give me a few sentences of that picture. And why did you choose this picture when I asked you, give me a picture, George, that tells me something about your life, why you're doing what you're doing, and why you're doing it? Why did you choose that picture?
Jesus gave parables, which are stories. And so I have one here in my explanation. This bridge builder, an old man going on a lonely highway. He came at the evening, cold and gray, to a chasm that was vast and wide and steep, with waters rolling cold and deep. The old man turned in the twilight dim. The sullen streams had no fears for him, but he turned when safe on the other side, and he built a bridge to span the tide. Old man said to fellow pilgrim, now You're wasting your strength with building here. The chasm you built, deep and wide, why build you this bridge at eventide? The old man lifted up his old gray head, and the path I've come, he said, there followeth after me today world leaders whose feet must pass this way. The chasm that was as naught to me, to any one of my brothers and sisters in the Lord, the pitfall be, he, she, they too must cross, and the twilight dim. Good friend, I'm building this bridge for them.
Awesome. George, your second home is the White House. What is going on?
Still building bridges.
Oh, I like it. I love it. Anyway, by the way, George, after this session, you know what I'm going to miss a lot?
What's that, beautiful?
The texts that I keep receiving from you. Because no, we don't have to plan anything in the future. So you have to give me an excuse to work further with you.
Amen, amen.
Thank you so much. Bob, you are an amazing, truly amazing person. And if you want to get inspired one morning, if you want to trust life and have more hope in your life, go and watch some of the videos that Bob have online. I especially enjoyed the one on empathy. You gave a deep, deep description of why and what empathy really, really is. You are an author and advocate and a lover of learning and connecting the dots. You have 3 girls. You are a Red Sox fan, right? So yeah. What I really like about your work is that you say, if it can move the world forward, we will design it. So tell me a little bit about what is your company doing, the Moving Up Media Lab. It's a nonprofit, but what do you do? What is the purpose of that organization?
Well, first of all, I was really sitting here hoping I wasn't going after George. So I'm 0 for 1.
Lord Jesus.
All of our work basically tries to appreciate that at the very root level, we want the same things in my life. You know, I want the same things for my kids that people in this room probably want. And there's a lot of really interesting and fascinating psychology and sociology about why we don't connect and how we talk about different issues. And so our work is trying to sort of figure that out and try to figure out how we can have more productive conversations around it. So the focus for a lot of our work right now is around the American dream. And on one hand, the American dream is this thing, that's a story that is so important to us as a country, this idea that anyone here can come here and if they work hard, they can make it. Mm-hmm. The issue is that hard work makes the American dream possible, but not always probable, right? So how do we sort of shine a light on all of those things that we need to make sure to provide opportunities for kids to sort of live a better life than their parents and for us all to be happy?
Bob, you might know that I'm Danish, meaning I'm one of the happiest nations in the world. And when I moved to US, I started thinking about why are Danes so happy? And I'll tell you why we are so happy. First of all, everyone is equal. Right? There's no inequality at all. It's the most equal society in the world. If you walk down the streets, you cannot tell who have money and who have not money because we all have the same money. And another thing is in Denmark, you are actually socially, you have a higher status if you enjoy life. If you work really, really hard and you work really, really long hours, people will ask you what's wrong with you. So it's a different kind of life. And the Danish dream is to get married, get 1 or 2 kids, maybe a little car and a very small house. And you know what? Most people actually accomplish that dream, meaning when they grow up, they feel, I accomplished what I should in my life. Here, even if you are the best of the best of the best, there's someone that is better, faster, more beautiful than you, and you will never win that race. So when is enough enough? It's just a thought. But nice. I love the American dream. I love it. Bob, you chose a picture of yourself, right? As a kid.
I can't see that picture. Do I look like Clooney? No?
Yeah.
Have
Yeah.
a picture.
Yes.
Yes.
Very young George Clooney?
Yeah. Tell us about the picture. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so I'm not going to get into a lot of like my own Horatio Alger story or whatever, because I'm sure we all have the struggles that we've come through, right? But I grew up in a poor neighborhood right outside of Boston, and my mom was a bartender who raised 3 kids on her own. And so, you know, and all kinds of abuses and tragedies that you could imagine sort of happened. And then we went and we moved to rural Pennsylvania. and experienced poverty in trailer parks. And yet here I am at this wonderful event today, and I've got 3 kids living in a great community, going to great schools, and have had a wonderful life. But the question I always ask when I look at that picture of that kid, and I look at where I am right now, is how did I end up here? And to really try to understand that. I mean, what's really fascinating, there's been a study, for example, that shows that people who have gone through a struggle, when they look back at people who are going through that same struggle, are less compassionate than someone who's never gone through that struggle at all. So the person who's quit smoking looks at the person who's trying to quit smoking and not sympathetic. The person who's been unemployed but found a job looks at the guy struggling and wonders why they haven't worked hard. And so what we're trying to do is get to this point of like just asking better questions. We spend a lot of time in advocacy, but if we spent more time in inquiry and asking each other the questions and getting us to reflect on our lives, we'd be able to get to a greater common understanding. And that's what that picture reminds me of.
Beautiful. Beautiful. You see, this is interesting because in the US, we will probably spend a lot of time talking about titles because you pay so much money to get your titles, I assume, right? In Denmark, we talk about who are you as a person and why are you here and why are you doing what you're doing. So we like the story behind why you're doing what you're doing. So it's a very different thing. Yael, you want to say something? No, I thought you raised your hand. No, because you're next.
Well, I did. I did.
Sorry, George.
I did. I want to say it was, to your story about not knowing, it was not an accident, but it was providence. Psalms 139 said God knew your footsteps before you knew what you were going to do. You didn't happen to be here. God ordained for you to be here through life and life experiences. We have callings and vocations, and we think that we can choose certain things, but you could ask yourself, where's my passion? And that passion that you feel is a call of God on your life. They tell you certain things. Now, continue on, please.
But George, we have to make sure that passion is positive. That passion cannot be about blaming and shaming the people in the cities or blaming and shaming the people outside the cities,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
That's not going to take us anywhere,
Absolutely.
right?
Continue.
So let's talk about the great purpose for the better. But I'm with you.
All right.
I don't know about you. Do you know any CIA agents? Yeah. Did you always want to meet one? Well, 17 years you have been working with national security, man. She has been a security advisor to the Vice President Biden. When is he going to run for president? Isn't he up next? I don't know. That's what I'm thinking. Anyway, you run your own company and you help navigate the global political, security, and social space to find innovative solutions to complex challenges. So you are at the right spot. We have lots of questions for you. You're also a special advisor for private companies, and you have been a CSR advisor for a Fortune 5 company? 5. I don't know the name, but I'm going to ask you one day. You have been rewarded 40 under 40 Forbes and many others. All of you are rewarded, but you are on the 40 under 40 Forbes. You write and publish for HuffPost, CNN, BBC, and many more things. When I Google you, people say that you are an all-around badass woman. I like that. I mean, that's just what people say. Yeah. And so, give her a big hand. Seriously. I mean, seriously.
That was an intro.
Yeah. You have 2 photos. You have one where you're talking and one where you're not talking. Tell us a little bit the story behind these 2 photos.
Sure. Once I finish blushing from that intro. It was such an interesting exercise when you asked us to send a photo that describes who we are. So I sent her 2 and I said, which one would you prefer to use? And I gave her 1 sentence behind each. And she asked me to use both. And reflecting upon the last day and a half of what I've been hearing here, it actually worked out really well. In the photo where I'm a child, I'm on the phone. It is very clear that I am not a wilting flower. I have opinions, I have things to say, and I think people should hear it. And that is what that photo is showing. And that was clear from a very young age. In the second photo, I am, at that point, I'm a diplomat in East Africa. I'm running a lot of our, what we would call Hearts and Minds programs, really embedding with communities along the Somalia border. And I am in full abaya. I am being dressed to go to a wedding. and I'm not talking at all. I'm listening, I'm absorbing, I'm learning about another culture. And in that moment, I would say the biggest moments of things that I've really accomplished that had positive impact in the world were because I was willing to listen more than to talk. I was willing to learn more about other cultures than I was to impose my own. And that came back through that understanding to actually helping some very serious, actual life-saving moments. So that's sort of I'm still opinionated, and I still think people should hear what I have to say sometimes, but that's sort of the growth between the talking and the listening in those two photos.
Awesome. Thank you so much. One of the things that I like about you, I like a lot, we spent more than 1 hour upstairs, and we have friends in common from Germany, and you kind of start liking Denmark more and more, so we will keep in touch. But the thing is, you have a very practical approach. Instead of sitting in an office reading reports, you actually go out there, and you're very well known for your ability to build strategic networks, right? And you feed that information into the people who never go out, and that's one of the many ways you help this great nation to become even greater. And you're one of the very few white women that I know that have worked in these places in Africa that you have been. So big kudos to you. Very briefly, there's a picture about me too up there. 2 kids under a table. I started my company in 2007, and it was in a basement. I was fired from my job. I was responsible for big organizations, and they fired me in 2007 because I was pregnant. And then I decided to run my own company, and people kept saying, slow down, slow down. I am the only brown woman in Denmark. They're all white. So people were like, you should slow down, and you should read some more statistics because it's never going to go very well for you. And I decided to prove them wrong, and now I have an office, and I'm working in 35 countries, and I'm still a mom, and I'm very proud of that. So go for that. So, where do we go from here? What is going on? What is going on in the US? People are blaming the people in the cities, and the cities are blaming the ones outside of the cities. What do you see? I mean, what do you see? What do you see going on? Yael, you first.
Sure. So it's actually what I see going on, which is what made me first speak out. Usually when you spend most of your career in the CIA, you don't talk about it. And I didn't talk about it until a year and a half ago, or almost 2 years ago now, when I started getting so concerned about the polarization that I'm seeing in the US, that I started to think that was actually a bigger existential threat to us as Americans than any of the things I used to work on overseas. I mean, I was one of our country's counterterrorism and counter-extremism experts. And I am more concerned about our inability. So I first started speaking out when I was talking about why was it easier. My aha moment was when I realized it was easier for me to have an open conversation with a suspected terrorist in Somalia than it is for me to talk to an American on the opposite side of a hot button issue for me. And that's when I started reshifting my focus to what can I do here at home to start trying to work on that polarization. And there's a million things that we can do, but if we all think the problem is too big for us to tackle alone, that's where, that to me is not the starting point. It's from the simplest things. Some people yesterday were talking about the simplest act of kindness. One of the gentlemen on the stage talked about how he used to close the elevator and now he opens the elevator, if you remember that at lunch. To me, it's about pushing ourselves, making a conscious effort to engage with people who are not like-minded, because only through being able to start to do that and to understand each other's perspective, we do not have to have the same opinions on any issue, whether it be on gun control, whether it be on any issue. But it doesn't mean we have to hate each other, not realize that we come from a place where we both believe our opinions are grounded in wanting the country to be better. So for me, it's really about pushing people to engage. We do not engage with people who are not like-minded when we do not have to. And that becomes, I think it's becoming worse and worse as technology continues to divide us more and more. So I continue to challenge people to, including at work, who's sitting around your boardroom table, including on the playground, who are you playing with, including who are your children in school with, really pushing to make that effort one day to go talk to someone who is nothing like you. And it sounds so simple, but that is honestly, in that picture, I mean, I can say that the reason there is a person that is home today that we rescued as a hostage is because people who are nothing like me, I became so close with them that when I needed to call on them to help us in a rescue operation, they did. And that's an extreme example.
Saving a life.
But it only came down to that mutual trust and respect that we had built.
Thank you, Yael. I remember I've been to a bunch of business schools because I was kicked out of the school in 7th grade. So when I grow up, I spent all my money studying just to prove them wrong. But the thing is, some of the business schools have changed their strategies. American business schools, they no longer go to, I don't know, Scandinavia or Africa for field research or study trips. No, now they go to states, right? American states to see what is really going on. I think that's a great approach, right? So it's a fragmented world. As a spiritual leader, George, right? You preach every day to all these amazing people. You speak to politicians. How do we get people united, even people with no faith? Because that does exist, right? So what do we do? Where do we go from here?
First of all, I don't want to assume that everybody know how we got here. You know, for some of us, slave ships, land slave trade. For some of us, 1896, Plessy versus Ferguson. For some of us, Brown versus Boy at Topeka, Kansas. Belinda Brown died this week. For some of us, Rosa Parks stood up December the 1st, 1955, so we are still standing up today. For some of us, you know, we did that 381-day bus boycott. Persons didn't have cell phones, fax machines, various things, but they made it happen because they had the heart to do great things. They got tired. As Fannie Lou Hamer said, he got tired of being sick and tired. For some of us. And for some of us, we came on that particular day, 1963, August 28th, where King spoke these 4 great words, I have a dream. The melting pot of America, I see that my children, when they grow up, they'll be able not to be judged by the content of their skin, I mean, the color of their skin, but the content of their character. For some of us. Some of us, Lyndon Baines Johnson, August 6, 1965, signed, the Voting Rights Act for some of us. So King was looking at all this macrocosm, he was looking at it, but he was still feeling that there was not togetherness. 66, 67, 68, he had some very hard years, as you may know, very hard for some of us. Because even after 1965, they were throwing bottles and bricks at blacks in Chicago and various other places, and they watered down the Voting Rights Act for some of us. So now he's saying to himself in 1968 in March, I wonder something, where do we go from here? That's the name of his book. Isn't it funny how your life always beginning again? Make you think one thing, you thought here, then you have to reevaluate that thing again and again and again. Interesting. When you know that you don't know because you were not designed to know, but you still know because God has not allowed you to know at that time. Interesting concept here for some of us. But at the end of the day, he said, where do we go from here, from chaos, our community? What do we do right now? We got what we somehow wanted, but I still feel disenfranchised in myself. So he's asking that question that here we are now in 2018, asking ourselves on March the 28th, where do we go from here? Chaos or community? Let me give you a little piece here, if you don't mind. Say, we don't mind, Reverend.
We don't mind.
It was a masterpiece, but he brought this story about a famous novelist who died, and amongst his papers was his plot for future stories. And this was his plot. A widely separated family inherits a house in which they have to live together. Interesting. And this is the great problem of humanity, King wrote. And I urge all of you to get this book. I'm saying it to you again. Where do we go from here? By Martin Luther King Jr. Chaos or community. And what he does, he said, we inherited a house, a great world house, in which we have now to wrestle with living together. Whites and blacks, browns and reds, Republicans and Democrats, Easterners and Westerners, and Jews and Gentiles, Catholics, Protestants, Muslims, Hindus, the poor and the rich. We are a family separated in ideas, cultures, and interests, and I give you that. But right now we have to learn how to live together because we can no longer live apart. So we must learn to live together in peace. I'm going somewhere. We live in a day where civilization is shifting its basic outlook. We are in a major turning point in our history where the presuppositions on which society is structured are being analyzed, sharply challenged, and profoundly changed. Even though for many of us this is our homeland here in the United States of America, but we can no longer ignore the larger world house in which we are dwellers. All inhabitants of the globe are now our neighbors. And this worldwide neighborhood have been brought into being largely as a result of the modern scientific and technological revolutions and advancements. The earth is experiencing redistribution. East is moving to the west and north to the south. Oppressed people cannot remain oppressed forever. And that people of color, as it was with the Israelites, are now moving towards the land of racial justice. Nothing could be more tragic than for people to live in these revolutionary times and fail to achieve the new attitudes and the new middle outlooks that the situation right now demands in 2018. So as it was with Rip Van Winkle, don't sleep through the revolution. Because as it was with Rip, you know Brother Rip, he went up to the mountain. And we went up to the mountain, as you already know, Pastor Durley. It was King George of England. But when he came down the mountain, it was President George. It wasn't the fact that he slept through 20 years. It was the fact that he slept through change and a chance to alter history. So my thing to all of ourselves, we go to our vicissitudes. Don't sleep through this revolution. You wake up on the other side.
Thank you, George. Thank you so much. We will not be sleeping, I promise you. This nation has never been more awakened, I think. Don't worry. I feel it. It's a pleasure to be in the U.S. at this very moment. It's very strong for me to see that. Bob, how do you make sure that white kids, brown kids, all kids don't look back at their childhood and only feel sorry for themselves, maybe excuse themselves, maybe, how do we make sure that kids that you grow up with start trusting themselves, know how to build a network of people who are supporting them, believing themselves even if they fail school, even if, how do we get that created, that empowerment in these areas outside the cities? How do we make them create jobs instead of looking for jobs? How do we make them more like you, people who go out and take action? Can we do that, or should we just give it up?
So there were like 14 questions there, right?
Yeah.
You got like 20 seconds. The humanitarian and wonderful tennis player Arthur Ashe once said, start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. Mm-hmm. And I think that we lose sight of that sometimes. I think that if you look at the sort of the chasms during the political sort of year that we had, mm-hmm. one of the saddest things was that people who were family members could not have a conversation about this. Mothers wouldn't talk to daughters, sons wouldn't talk to fathers.
Oh, yeah.
And if you think about this relative to just like several years ago, I'm going to date myself here, but All in the Family, Archie Bunker was a bigot. But they modeled the way a family has a conversation around difficult topics that started with love. And so, to me, when you think about start where you are, most of us don't. Most of us don't stand up in our boardrooms. We don't start with our communities. We don't have conversations. We don't reach out to people who maybe aren't like us that we know. And, in terms of do what you can, it's sort of, or use what you have. It's like I once wrote this piece on the Huffington Post, right? And it was right after Sandy Hook. And I've got 3 little girls. And so as any parent, that time and every subsequent shooting after that, I was just rocked, And I wrote something on there that I thought was reasonable. And I thought the Huffington Post, being primarily progressive sort of place, that the people who would respond would be would be like me, It'd be like, hey, and it wasn't, it was sort of it was an introduction. It was like trolling 101, right?
Yeah.
But what was interesting is that, so I saw these sort of like comment after comment, which was sort of, pro-guns. And I could have dismissed it and just been like, they're unreasonable. How do they not see this? And I vowed to myself I was going to answer every single comment. And I started with a, thank you for taking the time to read this. And I can see what you might be saying here. And have you thought about this? And over the course of those conversations, you'd see people be like, hey, thanks for taking the time. Most people don't listen, and I don't quite see this, but maybe over here. And to me, that was a really revealing moment, like that you can actually have conversations. And I'm not going to, I trust you, one remarkable story, if you guys haven't heard it, I'm not going to tell it right now, but just Google Sarah Silverman and troll. And you will see an act of love and kindness in the face of hate that will restore a little piece of humanity for you. And so I think that when we talk to our kids and we want to model our behavior, it made my skin crawl when I would see the way in which we would refer to people in the political spectrum. And even people who didn't mean it maybe the way they said it, or it was taken out of context, that it was just true that we just, we all like to think that we're experts in someone else's lived experience. And the reality is we are not. And empathy is a door that swings both ways.
Exactly.
And we like to think that empathy is about caring for the people in front of you or the people who you think are vulnerable. And true empathy is trying to understand the person who's against you.
Oh, man. That's beautiful, no? Yeah, you can tweet that. It's good. Yeah, give it a hand. Bob, I was also thinking, you speak about empathy and being with people who are very different from yourself. All of you guys talk about these biases, and we prefer to spend time with people who have the same age, gender, nationality, educational background as ourselves. We usually go for people who have 4 factors in common with us, and we build communities because it's high level of trust. You know what I mean? We've been through the same thing, so we have our own community. It's really a big danger, because what we really learn from is from being with people that irritate us, right? People who are irritating, they are onto something. So listen, if you meet someone today that is super irritating, spend time with that person. Don't leave, okay? But the thing is, truly, honestly speaking, this is easier said than done. In my country, Denmark, we can go to the library, and once in a month, we can rent a taboo. Meaning there will be taboos, like there will be a Muslim, it will be a homosexual, it will be like, whatever. People you read about in the newspaper, people you don't have access to in your community, and then you go to the library and you rent a person. And you sit next to the person for half an hour, or you rent him or her for 1 hour, and you ask questions. How is it to be a homosexual? Is that a disease? Does it spread? You have all kinds of different questions. And this is actually funny, and we are exporting that philosophy, so please implement in your neighborhood. You just have to find these people who can be rented, right? It's awesome. Let me know if you need to rent a Scandinavian. I will show up. But the thing is, but it's really, sometimes it's down to the basics, because even if you want to know, that's why I said living in Texas for 2 years, when I picked Texas, it was the state in US that is far, far away from the values in Denmark. And I looked at Texas and I said, that's where I'm going to live. So, you have to work, and really go do it. But back to the really big issue here. We have people losing jobs every day, right? They see people leaving towns, everything is disappearing, and they look at the the big cities. This is happening all over the world. And the cities, that's where the money is, that's where the power is, and they are making politics on behalf of the people living outside the cities. So how do we build that community? My experts have given you different kinds of views, kinds of different solutions and perspectives. We have the international, we have the spiritual, we have the more creative, and the more... So do you think you have a solution? Because it's easy to sit and wait for the solution. But can I say something? The solutions are never going to be from the government. It's never going to be from any politicians. Never. No. It's from you guys in here. And everyone in this room, if we get together, we can start the next revolution, right? So the power is in the room. Now I'm going to give you 20 minutes. I know, Yael, that you have to leave because you have students waiting for you. Yeah, so any final remarks before I will kick it off and they will start working with some of the things you talked about?
Sure, I saw multiple people go like this when you said, did you ever want to meet a CIA officer? I saw multiple people go, no. No, but it's interesting.
Yeah.
And it's part of the reason I never spoke out before, because I knew that people would have biases and assumptions of who that made me, and therefore didn't need anyone to know that title, right?
Yeah.
So again, it's just one more example. I am going to mill around until 3:30, but unfortunately I do have to leave. If anyone for some reason wants to follow up, I can leave cards with you. But just absolutely everything everybody said here. Push yourself to know someone who you never thought you wanted to before, and you may change your perspective on why. Listen, I also get trolled online. I don't read the comments because often as a woman, they're about how you look as opposed to what you're saying.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
But I applaud the fact that you engaged with the comments, because once you ask 2 to 3 questions, you'll get beyond that anger to, well, but what was your childhood like that made you feel this way? So anyway, I will mill around a little bit, but I apologize that I won't be here for the very end of it.
Okay, good. George, anything you want to say before I kick it off? You know, they have to start working.
Absolutely. One thing is that Martin Luther King Jr. was one man. Jesus Christ, one man. You get my drift? John Hope Bryant, who has done marvelously well, was one man. You don't need 2, 3, 4, 5. You just need one person, a bridge builder.
The power of one.
What I like about this bridge builder is that he crossed over, but when he crossed over, he turned, and he brought other persons with him. And I don't know, the story never said why, but all I do know is that there was someone looking at this particular bridge builder and asked him a question. Why do you build this bridge at eventide? Why do you build this bridge in your life to bring others over? But he understood the concept that I can't be me unless you are you. And he understood the concept that we're in this thing together. So what I want you to do, I want you to get your pads and your pencils. I want you to get your tables rolling. You hear what I'm saying? I want you to put together a format on how to change these United States of America. Now, you got my order? I need for you to start moving. You are the bridge builder. You are the person that we have been looking for. That's handle your business.
Hell yeah, yeah. Bob, one final remark before they start working.
No pressure after that.
If this were a baseball game, they would pitch around George to get to me. So, so since I'm at the plate, I'll say something. Muhammad Yunus, I don't know if you're familiar with him. He was basically the father of microfinance. He was in traditional banking, frustrated with his inability to sort of really make a difference on issues of poverty. And one day he said, screw it. And he walked outside of his branch and he saw a single woman who was sort of selling her wares. And he asked her, what would you do if I gave you this little bit of money? Loaned you this little bit of money? Would you return it? And hence, she's, oh, I would do this, and I'd expand, and I would go ahead, and she came back, and she repaid the loan, and hence microfinance was born. And when Eunice was then asked sort of like, well, what would you tell anyone who's designing something to create change, which is what you're going to be asked to do? He said, start with one. What are you doing with one person? And that can expand to some kind of big community program. It can expand to something national. But picture what you're doing with one person, and then figure out where you go from there.
Awesome. That's a wonderful kickoff. 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and at each table we have a session leader, an amazing person who want to make sure that you spend the 20 minutes very wisely. After the 20 minutes, we will be summing up, and one from each table will give me one sentence or a little bit more than one sentence on what is the solution, and we will have it written over here, and hope we'll use your suggestions in the work further on. Yeah? Any questions, please let us know.
One thing before we start, does every table have a table leader? Could we see show of hands? We're not sure if we've got one at every table. If there is not, if you all could move, or I see a few stragglers in the back there, if you could move to a table that has a session leader, that would be very helpful.
Do it.
All right, we are back here. We are back here. Please pay attention. We are back.
Okay, so,
Bridge builders.
yeah.
More like it.
Thank you, George. So now we really want to get to know what you have done and what you have talked about. And remember, we are many, many tables in here. So you only have maybe half a minute. I beg you on my knees, only half a minute to give your one sentence of one of the solutions. And you can stay after the session is closed and explain more, and you're welcome to do that.
And by the way, I can be bribed. So,
Okay, let's take table for table.
all right.
Let's start here.
Who's
Why not?
first? Over here.
Hi. We came up with a lot of ideas.
Your
And,
name, sir.
As far as
Sir, your name.
my name is Bridgman Bolger. I'm
Okay.
the president, the chair of the Young Democrats of Georgia Black Caucus.
Thank you very much.
And we came to the conclusion that we need to work together as a community because we have a lot of the same common problems, whether it be education or healthcare. People in rural areas and people in inner cities, they face a lot of the same problems, and it's not each other's fault. So-
Finding the common things.
Well, yeah, so as a complete sentence, I would say that we need the community collaboration, cultural exchange, and working together to fix the common problems. And that way we can better coexist.
Amen.
Hold on, I need more steps on my watch. Hold on. Hey, come on, fitness, man, fitness. Right here.
Thank you. We have two educators at the table,
Your
so
name?
we concentrated on the power of the voice of the youth and children as cultural ambassadors to bridge the divide. Who's going to say no to a cutie? And, and they don't have the filters we have as adults. We have a lot of negative experiences we live through, and children don't see color. They don't see. So we want to focus on culture, not race, because culture always brings us together. Culture is powerful because we have things in common. Everyone in this room has things that we share in common as human beings. Is the love for humanity through culture, what I call culture philanthropy. So using children to be a powerful force to train in the community. We also mentioned what you said you're doing in Denmark, but doing in neighborhoods where is one-on-one meeting people from urban to rural.
And
Bridge
then-
builders, we
and-
need
and
your
then-
names. We
and
need
then-
your name when you stand up and
Oh,
be able
thank
to
you.
speak.
I'm Veronica Herrera from Chattanooga, Tennessee. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right. Next bid is going at $95. Going once, going twice.
Hi, everybody. I'm Julie ANSYS, Associate Vice President of Institute Diversity at Georgia Tech. We had a lively table, a great table. So at base, there were so many issues discussed. We talked about the need to bring people together and to facilitate dialogue, and oftentimes one of the challenges around that is fear at its base, and the need for both understanding and respect, as well as trust. And one solution is to bring people together around shared values, shared experiences. And the other solution is to immerse individuals in experiences that are different from themselves. And one way to do that is through technology, artificial intelligence. So I don't know if you wanted to follow up with that example.
So Giovanni hit us with AT&T. What I was sharing is the concept of virtual reality. In the field right now, virtual reality is known as only as games, right? Games for the consumer. But there's a lot of research out there that shows that when you immerse an individual in an experience where they see the other, right? Whether it could be somebody else from another gender, someone with a disability, somebody from a different race, somebody from a different accent, When they experience the other, it puts a seed that allows them to germinate greater level of empathy. And it typically you see anywhere between 30 and 47% greater levels of empathy. So we talked about the fact that might not be the ultimate game changer, all right? It might not be an enduring thing, but it certainly could be a heck of a start. And then the other example that we use is we recognize in this circle, in this dialogue, even though it was very passionate and it was very transparent, that if we were to have that dialogue virtually in a constructive environment where we don't see each other, we could see avatars, right, like a smiley face, maybe a square, something like that. I wonder if we would have shared extra comments, extra insights. Maybe we would have more authentic reactions with each other. So we talked about how that virtual space could do that. Thank you.
You make me think about something. In Davos, every January, there's a global summit for the world leaders, and I've been honored to be there 6 years in a row. We have a refugee camp. It's not a real one, of course, but it gives you a very good impression of how it is to be in a camp. And you want the CEO of World Bank to try to be a refugee. You want that, right? So instead of bringing him to a camp, we bring the camp to him. And it is still, this very day, the strongest experience these leaders have. It's, all the world leaders, kings and queens, they come to that mountain every year. We spend 1 week together. And that camp is by far always that experience that have the deepest impression of them. And I was thinking, could we do that somehow, that you, instead of renting a person, you rent a life, I'm willing to put my house on that market if people want to know how it is to live in Silicon Valley, because they might actually sometimes find out that we have issues too. Yeah, okay, thank you so much.
Next spot, for somebody who's got 2 tickets for the Braves game tomorrow. Come on, they are my favorites, come on. That's our stadium as well, SunTrust Stadium, by the way.
Hello, everyone. My name is India Alston. I'm from Washington, D.C. And I'm in the marketing and advertising field. So one of the core themes from our table was exposure, right? I think that's one that we all think about. And this be everything from exposure to economic information, social information, and a lot of that for us was that limited access to information yields limited access to opportunities. So what we kind of grappled with was, how do we use technology, which is such a popular vehicle, and traditional forms of a handshake and a smile to share this message, to create a new curriculum that's evidence-based on 2 different platforms. So does that start with creating the tech vehicle that then translates itself into the community, or starting with the community and then sort of gathering information and creating the evidence that translates to technology? So one idea, or that's kind of our idea, so to speak, but one thing that we talked about as far as a new curriculum is when we look at race, which is probably one of the biggest divides, we identify race as a social construct developed to divide, disconnect people. And we can easily create and replace that with a social construct that is developed to bridge and connect. So how do we replace race with an opposite word that has a just as equal an impact?
Beautiful. Let me share a very short story. When I moved to US, we don't have a lot of people of color in my country, frankly. So I didn't know how to say that in a proper way. I don't want to offend anyone. And I took my daughter to the class in Austin, and there was a girl of color. Is that how you say it? I don't even know. I tried to avoid that. And then I said, what do you say about this girl over there, right? And she said, Mom, you just say the girl in the pink shirt. That's how it should be, right? Anyway.
All right, who's next? Right over here.
Hi, I'm Michael Ginsby. I teach high school. I teach economics and social issues at a high school in Southwest Atlanta. So some of the things that our group talked about were more just overarching ideas, some bigger things. And what we kept coming back to was just this idea of love and what is love? What does it mean to have like mutual respect for each other? Some of the cultural divides that we just first identified was the problem that America is just so big. And that there are so many different cultural divides that we deal with. And so we talked about age, race, regional barriers, language barriers, political barriers, education level barriers. And then kind of ended with just talking about in love, like being intentional with that. And so deciding to make yourself uncomfortable and go meet somebody that doesn't look like you. That we can't bridge this gap if we don't ever make our way like to the chasm. And so just like knowing that sometimes you have to make yourself uncomfortable, you have to go out and reach out to the people that maybe you don't know and maybe you don't have any kind of concept of, and just ask the silly questions and start with that, and always like, with the underlying theme of love.
Good going. I'll come back to you. Let me add some more steps on my Fitbit. Here we go, man.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Dee Lofton from Memphis, Tennessee. I have a management consultancy. And at our table, we talked about the power of perception, so that we are giving off our own vibes when we have our conversations with people. There are examples of the bias among other African Americans about each other, and then the kind of bias you face in other cultures. And one of the solutions we talked about was just hosting a similar situation like this, a table conversation in your own neighborhood. We don't meet our neighbors anymore, so maybe a table conversation with coffee is a way to meet your neighbors, find out what their bias is, be open and honest about it. And then part of the solution for healing that community is just be respectful and aware of what your own biases are, but being able to say, as part of your ground rules, we may not agree, and that's okay.
That's okay. Exactly. Thank you. Beautiful.
Hold on. My wife, 32 years old wife, 32 years wife, knows that I keep my promises. So I'm going to be here.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Deborah Watts with the Emmett Till Legacy Foundation. And we had a pretty active communications, I guess, around this topic. And one of the things that I haven't heard yet, and that is bilingual instruction, linguistics, and understanding from a communications perspective, how important it is to understand others' languages. And that probably pushes us into other elements of understanding about culture, how we communicate, what things may be some insensitivities around, how we refer to others, and, to move us away from just doing that in a business sense, but also as we relate to each other on the same level. And I think that would bridge the gap that our team came up with. And then also cultural etiquette. And I think that was part of it too. Just being intentional about understanding others' cultures and building some plans and strategies around that, and being more strategic in how we incorporate that in our everyday lives, our business lives, and what we do maybe in our faith-based communities as well. And then healing our communities, being intentional about coming up with ideas that, and recognizing where we may have pain and stress and stressors, but then understanding how we need to get to that healing first, and that is being self-aware. Who are we? And what are we bringing to the table? And then also making sure that the others are important as well. Sort of like the purpose, process, payoff. That payoff with those communications is about what that other person is, what's important to them. So you have to have those difficult conversations in order to come to that point. And then the last thing was making sure that we're intentional about using our youth, or not using them, but incorporating them and exposing them. And I think we've heard that earlier, exposing them, but then being intentional about using institutions that are available to us to make sure that we're exposing them, along with using the arts and culture and other things to educate them and expose them to other cultures. Thank you.
Okay, we have only a few more minutes, so keep it brief. Yeah?
No more jokes. That's all they paid me for, by the way.
Good afternoon. My name is Alma G Davis, and I'm the CEO of the Alma G Davis Foundation. And we came up with one sentence
Thank
we
you.
talked about the solution and the issues in the solution, and our Senate states, as we look at issues that divide our culture, such as lack of understanding, cohesiveness, generational advancement, and economic disparities, a solution to bridging that divide is through education, emerging and appreciating cultural diversity, mentorship, building health and financial wellness, being grateful and self-appreciative, and lastly, by respecting each other's differences.
Thank you.
You go one more over here.
Okay, so I have a short paragraph, not a sentence. So we talked about this theme of listening and training, also town halls, which was mentioned before, and shadowing and creating these real conversations. Another thing that we often miss is in the workplace, the things that we say you can't talk about is religion and politics. But in your workplace, that's where you're surrounded by so many people of different cultures. So how do we start to train people that it's not that you can't talk about them, but that you learn to talk about it civilly in the workplace? So solution, it can be providing that training to employers where it's not, oh, here's a diversity training, but where it's fun and interactive and you start to learn new skills and learn to have these conversations in a civilized manner.
Awesome.
We have one last comment coming from here, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Charlotte Davis, and our table came up with a solution to teach tolerance early. In other words, infuse it in the curriculum. Teach children to communicate by teaching them to hear to listen, and not hearing to respond, hearing to understand, so that there is compassion developed from a common ground of humanity.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you first of all for coming. We have one more, okay.
All right, here we go.
Thanks for listening to Tag Along. Good afternoon. My name is Tarik Black-Bashir. I'm a project manager in the Mayor's Office of Innovation and Performance here at the City of Atlanta. We also talked about the theme that we saw across the speakers was that one-on-one, breaking down those silos across the cultures, the race, the economy. So we talked about having a cultural competency open forum. We would have champion change agents to make people feel safe and able to share our issues. And so we could have a series, so each one would talk about, one would be, red, blue, and independent, one would be across class, and then we could break bread, because a lot of the times sharing a meal with someone helps to break down those barriers. And then this could be expanded, so it could be on a smaller level of, each person that leaves from the Hope Global Forum could host one of these, that we could have the Hope Global Forum to kind of provide the facilitation guides and the questions, and then it could expand to go into the schools or to kind of become a cultural exchange program. That's one of the most popular programs within the State Department. We could make it a domestic cultural exchange program as well.
That's well done, everyone. I cannot wait to read all this and give it back to Hope. You might not know, but John Brian Hope, who created Hope, I'm on the board of one of his foundations called Global Dignity. It was an idea he got 10 years ago that we should go and preach and teach what does it mean to live a dignified life and what does it mean to treat other people with dignity. And we are active in more than 60 countries, and we educate every year more than 800,000 kids all over the world. He does that too. So I'm just saying, yeah. Anyway, I hear tolerance, understand your biases, get together in your community, understand. Yeah, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say something. Actually, everything everyone came up with, we discussed, all except making sure that we are, when we get together in those town hall meetings, that we're sharing. Thank you. I do a lot of talking in Africa, so without a microphone. But to make sure that we're sharing our resources. When we do come together, that we're sharing the resources that we have with the groups that we're actually involved in, because that's something that is definitely needed in all communities.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Okay. So I know some of you have to run for the next session, so it's my honor to make sure that we close on time. George and Bob, what do you think about all this? What do you think? Any final comments on what you've heard so far?
Come here, little boy. This is my nephew right here.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Say, hey, nephew George.
Next generation. Let's give him a hand, huh?
I'm going to close out like this, and Bob going to do his thing. I only have a minute, only 60 seconds in it. Force apartment, can't refuse it. Didn't seek it, didn't choose it, but it's up to me to use it. I must suffer if I lose it, give an account if I abuse it. For a tiny little minute, but eternity's in it. A bishop once said there are two ways for a leader to go through life. Number one, as a thermometer, or number two, as a thermostat. A thermometer tells the temperature, measures the climate, but a thermostat sets the tone and creates the climate. And that is who you are. You are the thermostat. And by your mere presence here today, you taming the minute, controlling the minute, and setting the agenda for the United States of America and the world. I end with this. Growing up in Mississippi, I noticed there were two types of trees. The first type of trees that I noticed was called the palm tree. And what I noticed about the palm tree is that which way the wind blows, the palm tree goes. In other words, if the wind blows to the left, the palm tree goes to the left. And if the wind blows to the right, the palm tree goes to the right. In other words, which way the wind blows, the palm tree goes. But I noticed yet another type of tree in Mississippi, and that tree was called the oak tree. And what I noticed about the oak tree is that it did not matter which way the wind blowed, whether it blowed to the left or to the right, the oak tree remained strong. Citizens of the world, there is one thing that I can tell you, and that is as you achieve your dreams and your aspirations and having all us to become one, there will be winds. Winds come, but winds do go. Winds come, but winds do go, because I never yet seen winds stay. So in the midst of the blowings of the wind, you keep looking up and to the hills, from whence cometh your help, knowing that your help coming from the Lord. And don't you dare sway from the left nor to the right, but you remain strong in the power of the Almighty God. Brother Bob.
Thank you, George. Thank you, George.
So now he's got to go and bring backup, you know. And if you get a chance to speak to his nephew, you will be duly impressed.
Absolutely.
He is a fine young man and wise beyond his years. I will just end with this really quickly. I want to thank you for coming here. My daughter once said to me when I was talking about some of the work that we do, she said, "Dad, it must be really great for you to do a job full of meaning." And I said, I paused for a second. I realized it truly was. And I hope that you also realize that that's the gift you give to your children and to the world. So thank you very much for coming here today.